Welcome back to my cozy little corner. Today we're going to be continuing on the journey to replicate this vintage ski sweater. Last time we finished the front panel of the sweater. We have 3 more panels left to go. And today for day 7 of Craftmas, we are going to be tackling the admittedly kind of large but still very exciting back panel of the sweater. If you followed us along last time, you'll remember that these panels are knit from the bottom up, which means that it starts with a whole lot of green ribbing and just plain knitting. Last time we passed the time by accompanying that knitting section with a lovely fairy tale about spinning, but today I thought we would switch things up and talk about a brief history of these vintage ski sweaters. Where did these even come from? Why was there such an explosion of these in the 50s and 60s? Let's go check it out. I'm going to be using the help of all of these books, patterns, and sweaters that I have to try to give you a little bit of an idea of what I found about the history of these vintage ski sweaters. I will link these books in the description if you want to read them for yourself. I can highly recommend them. They're very interesting. But also please remember that as I'm going through this is my hobby. I am not a professional. Double check everything for yourself, especially anything that you hear on the internet. Now these 50s and 60s ski sweaters, like the one I'm wearing or the ones in this stack here, are highly entwined with skiing. There have been multiple Olympians and world champions from around that time that have worn these styles of sweaters as they're winning medals. Stein Eriksen wore one of these sweaters while winning his Olympic gold medal in 1952, and Inger Bjørnbakken wore her sweater when she won the World Championships in 1958. Also, please remember, I do not speak Norwegian. Those are 2 Norwegian names of people, so I will be saying a lot of words and names in Norwegian, and I've tried my best to look up and follow the pronunciation, but please do excuse me if they're not the best. As you might have guessed, the reason these athletes were wearing Norwegian sweaters when they were winning their gold skiing medals is they were from Norway, which, if you think of what the traditional Norwegian sweater looks like, at least the one I picture in my mind, brings about some of those images of what you would see in these vintage ski sweaters. They look kind of similar for a good reason. The book Norway's Knitted Heritage by Annemor Sundbo goes into a wonderful history of Norwegian knitted sweaters. It's a very interesting perspective because she ran what's called a shoddy mill, where they take worn out woolens, like knit sweaters, shred them, and turn them into new yarns and fabrics, blankets, and sweaters. However, as she was receiving these bags of donations of these worn out sweaters, she realized that there were some amazing examples of all different kinds of Norwegian sweaters and Norway's knitted heritage that she just could not throw away. So she saved over 1 ton of these sweaters from being scrapped and has put together this beautiful book on the knitted heritage that started because of her amazing collection of these knitted sweaters, of which she has many pictures of throughout the book. They're just wonderful to look at. I can highly recommend it. For me, when I think of a Norwegian knit sweater, is something kind of similar to this, which I believe is called the lusekofte, which literally means the louse sweater or lice sweater because of this spotted or dotted pattern throughout the body of the sweater. Of the Norwegian sweaters that I own, namely this one, this gorgeous one, and the one I knitted for Craftmas last year, all of them have these spots, except for the one that I'm wearing and recreating this year, of course. Although this book also has examples of luseless sweaters that are still Norwegian and Nordic sweater styles. But something that I do find interesting now that I have one and I'm recreating one without the spots versus the ones that do have the spots, I feel like there might be more than just it looking pretty, because I do think that these spots are very beautiful. But when you look on the inside, because of the color work, we actually have 2 layers of yarns throughout the body. So for me, from here up, it's about 2 layers of wool because of the color work up here, versus from here down, it's just 1 layer of wool. So this part of my body is slightly cooler than this part, and I can tell you that's true. I'm much warmer up here. So I think it might also be functional. If you have that extra color work through the body, you'll be doubly protected by the wool throughout the body. Not only are they called lusekofte, but they are also called sometimes called the Setesdal sweaters because of the region in which they're knit as being part of the folk costume there. And you'll notice that there is a high concentration of color work around the neckline and the upper arms. There were other styles of Norwegian sweaters that became popular in different regions besides just the lusekofte, but a lot of them did have this similar theme of lots of color work, and especially concentrated around the neckline and upper arms. The color work included a lot of motifs that we are still familiar with today. There's the X's and O's, the star or flower, which is actually a very ancient symbol, so it was not invented for Norwegian knitting. People and animals. I love all of these. I feel like you can almost tell a story with the color work of the knitting that's done. And a lot of times it does have mystical, magical, protective meanings. Again, read this book if you want more in-depth information on that. Norway has a strong knitting tradition. They have a strong tradition of knitting sweater-like shirts. And in 1930, Anniken Sibben Bøhn published a book on Norwegian sweater patterns. She worked for the Norwegian Craft Association and was immersed in Norwegian folk art. And she saw these different traditions around Norway, and she had pieces and items of antique knitting herself, and she wanted to create basically a very tasteful version of all of these patterns, and she wanted people to have good taste in their knitting. And speaking of Norwegians wearing knit Norwegian sweaters while they were skiing, Anniken herself knit the sweater that Johan Grøtungsbråten wore when he won several medals. So this tie of Norwegian sweaters and skiing, very strong from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Her book is still reproduced today. This is the Norwegian Knitting Designs 90 Years Later by Wentje Rold and Anniken Sibben Bøhn. Another fantastic book because it modernizes Anniken's designs and gives them some context. Anniken was also kind of groundbreaking because she designed, as far as I could tell, the first top-down in the round colorwork yoke sweater. It was named after the inspiration that she had for the sweater, which was Norway's first talkie that was about the Inuit population of Greenland. So I won't call it by its original name. I will call it the Greenlander sweater. Like I said, this one was revolutionary in terms of its construction and its design. And if you look at it, you will probably see a lot of similarities with Scandinavian sweater designs today. And a little bit of these vintage ski sweaters as well. A fun little side anecdote in the history of wearing these sweaters or Norwegian costumes to ski, there is a cartoon from the Victorian era that shows a lady in Norwegian traditional ski costume going out to ski versus what she looks like coming back from skiing. Though to be fair, that is also what I look like coming back from any physical activity, no matter what I'm wearing. So I don't know how fair that is to blame it on the costume necessarily. I think that this combination of Norwegian skiing dominance, especially in the 50s and 60s, combined with the winners wearing Norwegian sweater designs, led to an explosion of these designs being popular in a very mainstream and widespread way. As a result of this, we have endless pattern books. Endless. So many of these that lean heavily into this design of sweaters. A lot of them do say Scandinavian sweaters. Some of them more lean into the fact that they're ski sweaters, but I do believe that they all have that common ground of being Norwegian, Scandinavian inspired ski sweaters. Anyway, I think that was maybe a very high and quick level look at the history of these vintage ski sweaters. If you're interested in this, I encourage you to look into it more deeply. I will again leave the link for all of these books so you can read into them for yourself. There's so much more to discover. I mean, it's intertwined with more ancient history, the first roots of knitting, circular versus flat knitting, Fair Isle, Icelandic slopey sweaters, Guernseys, jerseys. If you're interested in that, I recommend reading about it. But now I think I'm finally done with the bottom very plain knit portion of the sweater, and it's time for us to maybe have a little bit of fun and look at a time lapse of me creating the colorwork section for the back of the sweater. Oh my goodness, I keep on having to restart the colorwork on the back. I don't know, my brain is just not in it this morning. First, I didn't have it centered, and I didn't notice it until after I had taken a picture for the time lapse, and I looked at the picture being like, that really is not centered. And now I am on my third row of color work the second time around. I'm having to turn on the third row, you tie in your third color, it's like, oh yeah, I have to remember the third color now, which is red. But I'm already knitting in red. What did I do? I didn't even notice it. And I used the wrong color for the board. Anyway, long story short, I'm gonna have to undo it one more time. And I'm just, I don't think I'm awake yet fully. So I'm gonna go grab myself another cup of coffee maybe, and then I'll come back to this. But maybe third time's the charm. That's what we always say, right? Third time's the charm. Let's step away for a second and come back and hope that it goes a little bit smoother. Color work inevitably takes a really long time. I found especially flat work color work takes a long time. So once again, I ran out of daylight trying to do a little stop motion film, but I hope you enjoyed the little snippet that you saw. I've been knitting as the evening's been going on, and this is how far I've got in the color work section. Again, there are a few mistakes that I'm gonna have to fix with some duplicate stitches. I don't know why I'm like, this is in particular tough for me. I'm not sure why. This is by far not my first flat work color work, but my brain has just not been able to focus on the stitches as well as it has in the past. So if you look at the back, one of the things that kept on slipping in my brain is which sections I was doing in tarsia. So you can maybe see here I did some accidental overlaps, and then on this side each individual star is its own intarsia work versus this is one ball. So there's a little bit of a difference between the two, but I always say that it's not my business what happens in the back of a sweater. I'm not the one looking at it. So if you see me, don't mention anything about maybe how strange the back of my sweaters look. No, but in all seriousness, I don't think it makes too big of a difference. Honestly, it kind of leads to an interesting comparison. Like once I'm done, I can look at each side and see what I think about one versus the other. So I think we'll get some interesting information out of it, as well as fixing things by duplicate stitching it for the first time. I think will be another bit where I can learn more about something than I knew in the past. Maybe not an ideal situation, but definitely a learning one. Okay, I am just going to keep knitting at this color work. The difference between this time and last time, the panels are 100% the same, except there's no neck shaping. I'm gonna put on my audiobook again and enjoy the rest of my knitting. So last time we finished this front section of the sweater, which you can tell is the front because of the neck shaping going on right here. This time we finished the back section of the sweater, no neck shaping, it just goes straight up to the back, and we have the appropriate stitches on hold on both for the neckline. So we are done, I think, with the biggest two panels of this sweater. And next time we will be knitting on the sleeves and fixing some of the errors that I've made in the color work on these front two panels. Thank you so much for watching. If you're enjoying this series, please feel free to subscribe, and I will hope that you join me next time as we continue to work on this vintage ski set.